My name is Matt Bonass and I'm a partner at a law firm, Bird & Bird. It's my pleasure this morning on behalf of myself and my partner Lizzie Reed to welcome you all to the Solar Quality event for 2021. We're looking forward to bringing together experts from the field of O&M, asset management and EPC to advance the long-term quality of Europe's solar power assets and to discuss an overview of the year, best practices and challenges and emerging technologies. I'd like to thank Solar Power Europe and Solar Energy UK for the opportunity to sponsor and introduce this fantastic event. I hope that most of you have heard of Bird & Bird within the solar industry. We were delighted once again this year to be named as the #1 law firm globally in renewables M&A transactions by volume. So it's very likely that we've worked with many of you across your deals. I hope that a number of you have also attended this event in the past in our offices and enjoyed a drink and a lovely view at the top of our building. I'm sorry we're not able to do that this year, but we're still delighted to have as many of you as possible join this webinar. I have the privilege of leading our global energy and utilities sector group, as well as our London corporate group. We have again this year been active across all areas of renewables, particularly solar, both here in the UK and internationally. We are excited to continue to support clients in this sector. For those attending the recent event in Birmingham, UK at the end of the last month, it's clear there remains great enthusiasm and resilience for UK solar with increasing demand and activity. This has been played out across the international stage, much of this buoyed by the recent COP26 in Glasgow. I know that Chris Hewitt, CEO of the Solar Energy UK, is pushing for 40 gigawatts of solar in the UK by 2030, and Europe and elsewhere are looking at similar targets. It's generally recognised that the next decade will be very significant for the industry. And it's interesting to reflect that notwithstanding legitimate concerns over the removal of subsidies, the industry is now very much operating a subsidy-free model with over 1 gigawatt of installed subsidy-free in the UK at the beginning of 2021. In terms of trends for ground-mounted projects, our solar clients are looking to enter into framework agreements to source projects and provide exclusivity over a pipeline of solar assets both in the UK and internationally. In the UK, we're working on some of the largest projects that are being developed by way of the NSIP regime and often by way of joint ventures with the big utilities, given the large amount of capex required. From large to small, there seems to be a real demand for residential solar across the world, perhaps driven by a demand for high efficiency modules and a renewed interest in community solar projects from large solar developers and in biodiversity, which we'll touch upon later today. My partner Lizzie Reed, who co-leads our global renewables group, will be moderating the panel after the one we're about to listen to on solar plus storage, which again is an area of significant growth, particularly the question of how best to optimize solar and storage's contribution to demand side management. Talking of batteries, we also do a large amount of work on EVs. We're seeing a growth in solar power EV charging hubs, or even the market for solar cars or solar road projects. Lizzie Reed also continues to lead the work we're doing with generators and off-takers on corporate power purchase agreements, again in the UK and internationally. There have been record-breaking levels of installs in some jurisdictions, with some new developments such as solar roofs or shingles, string inverters, and solar power is becoming more efficient than ever with a more diverse supply chain. Finally, on the O&M side, I'm particularly looking forward to the session on AI and data-driven quality management and the discussions on how best to maximize component quality. So without further ado, I'd now like to hand over to our first panel discussion, which is on best practices, which will be moderated by my good friend and client, Matt Black at Solivus. But first of all, I'd like to hand over to Steve Williams, who is a member of the panel and a founder and managing director of Clean Solar Solutions, who wants to just add a few words before the panel discussion. So thank you everyone for joining this morning. I hope you have a fantastic day and a good day tomorrow. I'll hand over to you now, Steve.
Thank you very much, Matt. Good morning, everyone. It's very nice to be here. My name is Steve Williams. I'm the Managing Director of Clean Solar Solutions and also the Chair of the Solar Energy UK Rooftop O&M Best Practice Guidelines Group. It's my privilege to be here today. I'm joining you all from Midtown Manhattan. It's around 4 a.m. So I'm keen to be here. I was so keen that I actually thought this group was yesterday. So I was set up like this yesterday morning at 4 a.m. as well, ready to go. But here we are on the correct day. So thank you all very much for joining. So just a few words about why we felt, why the SE UK organisation felt that best practice guidelines were needed for rooftop, is because we could see there was a strong focus on the ground mount utility scale sector, but we recognised that rooftop was a sector all of its own, very different working principles in many, many different ways. We know that there were working at height risks that had to be accounted for that obviously are not counted on ground mount solar, and also types of soiling, levels of soiling, other issues, changing panels at height, finding issues at height with solar arrays. So we know that there was a lot of good quality systems out there, but we recognised as a group also that there's lots of distressed assets out there. So it was important that as we had our colleagues walking around on roofs and engaged on rooftop O&M work, that they had some form of health and safety guidelines that they could be going along with, and also that they had some form of guidance when it came to checks and tests that needed to be done. So version 1 was released about 12 months ago. It's been a very successfully put together document in my opinion. Version 2 had some minor changes compared to all the work that we had to put together to build version 1. Some of those changes we can see on the slide that's in front of everybody now. We have the additions of sections on floating solar. While this isn't necessarily related to rooftop O&M, because you are still working at height, even though the floats are on the water, we felt that many of the principles that we were building as a group for rooftop solar applied to floating solar as well. So there was a crossover between the two industries that we recognised. We also recognise that there's very little information about floating solar O&M, so we felt that it was a good addition just to include some kind of information for those that are starting to move their business towards maintaining floating solar assets. Also, we had some updated information about cybersecurity, which we all know is a growing issue. Many instances have been put out across the news of break-ins on various cyber systems, and the security of maintaining these assets was very, very important. So we've had some information in version 2 added to our document. Also, the use of drones, while it was mentioned in version 1, there's a lot more detail in how drones can be used to assess and examine assets at roof level. And we know that the information that drones can provide is valuable because we can really then go onto a roof knowing the kind of situation that we're walking into in terms of issues and in terms of soiling levels and other related problems. We've had some updates and revisions to some other sections as well, such as the monitoring. This was dealt with in more detail in version 2. Also, the cleaning section has got more detail in there as well. So we feel then that this is a really good document, version 2. I've read this last week that Solar Power Europe has put together some information on their rooftop side as well, with a rooftop document or part of the ground mount document containing rooftop information. So I'm looking forward to reading through this in the next week or so. Seeing if we can really align the two documents, I feel would be a good idea. While there will be some differences between UK and European standards, maybe all of these can be ironed over, and we can look to gel together the two documents. Version 3 of the O&M document, as we see for the next 12 months that we hope to release, will contain even more detailed information. We know that version 2 has got training, and version 3 will go into more detail on this. At the moment, there seems to be a dearth of official qualifications for solar O&M workers. So it would be good to see if we can have some sort of engagement as an industry in this, see if we can gain some formal qualifications. Also, version 3 will hopefully have the endorsement of the UK Health and Safety Executive, which we feel will be an excellent addition. The UK Health and Safety Executive is an authorised body that can approve documents, and they will go over our document with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that they're happy to endorse this. So as a group, we're quite excited about this. So that's sort of the highlights from version 2 of the Rooftop O&M Guide. If anyone has any questions, then they'll be able to email those through to Solar Energy UK or through to myself or through to Solar Power Europe. But hopefully everyone will enjoy reading through version 2 of the document. And thank you all again for your time in listening to this short section. And we'll hand on now to the next part of the panel.
So, hello, my name is Gottschalg. I'm the head of the Fraunhofer CSP and I'm the vice chair or the outgoing vice chair of the SPE's Lifecycle Quality Working Group. And as such, I was hoping to present a little bit about our activities in the last year and what we want to discuss here. Next, please. Next, please. Okay, the activities traditionally center around the guidelines we have written, which then end up becoming quality or best practice marks. Traditionally, there was the O&M and the asset management quality guidelines or best practice guidelines. Since then, we have the EPC guidelines, which were edition 1 last year, and this year we've added, to bring everything together, a lifecycle quality best practice guideline. We disseminate this in various events. We just end up having mirror groups in South Africa. We have mirror groups in India, where we try to disseminate our work to other continents or regions. And we work very strongly with the open solar contracts together with Bird & Bird, amongst others. And this year, I think the focus was bringing together and bringing some structure into the guidelines, and that resulted in the life cycle quality guideline, which is presented in the next slide. This should acknowledge that the life cycle quality or quality in general runs through the entire life cycle. One phase of a process in the life cycle of an asset will affect all other phases in the life cycle. So if I'm under specifying in the beginning, I would pay a price, and by maybe having issues in the system or whatever, or if I don't follow the right training guidelines for personnel, I end up having to deal with them later on during O&M phase. So as a new publication, we try to bring together these interactions between the different life cycles. We also try to get comprehensive definitions between the different stakeholders and manage expectations at the interfaces between the different phases of the life. That was always one of the main features of the guidelines, is to manage expectations. It's very important that the due diligence, which starts in the beginning, will be carried through in the EPC guidelines. And then once this passes through into the O&M phase or asset management phase, again, these things need to be joined up. So we try to bring everything together. We also try to bring a skills matrix, which should cover more than one phase of the entire industry, which then leads as a first guideline in the process of the asset lifetime, the EPC guidelines, which is in the next slide, please. Well, that was one too many. One back. Okay, there you are. Thank you. Here, this was last year we presented version 1. This year is version 2, where we cleaned it up a lot. We added a new chapter for PV power plants with storage. As mentioned before, this is a coming topic. We strengthened our recommendations on ensuring component quality throughout the entire procurement process. We have some recommendations or updated recommendations on conducting aerial inspections. And we have a more integrated approach to health and safety, security and environment, and try to coordinate better with the other existing guidelines. And finally, this year we worked on the O&M guidelines, which are in the next slide. So We revamped here the chapter on O&M on rooftop solar. So there is also a coordination effort required with the previous speaker. We have new industry trends, which we report here, which again, better monitoring practice tend to reduce the cost of quality and thus just improve the financial return of an asset. So again, we just cover those ones here. We look at environmental recommendations, and we introduce new methodologies for calculating and managing the technical risks, which is the risk number. And we have an integrated approach to health and safety again with the other guidelines. So that was actually quite a full year. And with that, I would say thanks for listening, and I hope that these 3 standards will be downloaded as often as previous standards in the past and will be as useful to the community as our work has been in the past. Thank you.
Good morning, all. If I can ask the other panelists to join the stage now, that I think great, we're all coming online. So firstly, thanks a lot to Matt for the introduction earlier, and to Bird and Bird for their sponsorship of this conference and their continuing support for this stream. That, as Matt mentioned, that we've had a number of conferences held in their offices in London over the years. Unfortunately, it's not possible to take place face-to-face this year, but that I think that we look forward to their continuing support and potentially joining them next year. Thanks also to Steve and Ralph for those excellent overviews of the work streams that have been taking place, and to Steve for his dedication in getting up repeatedly early to join us. I think that it's a testament to, I guess, many of the individuals and organizations that have been putting in a huge amount of work into developing these best practice guides. As you'll see that we're now on to, I guess, the 5th version of the O&M best practice guide, and that we've got with the EPC, the O&M, the life cycle quality, that a whole suite of documents have been put together which really kind of detail what best practice looks like now for an industry, that from a standing start pretty much 15 years ago, that we've gone to about 150 gigawatts in Europe now. I'm waiting for Solar Power Europe to bring out their updated numbers for this year, but it looked like it was around that amount. That over that period that the industry has changed massively, that there's been a lot of learning by doing, that as part of that, that the costs of solar have dropped dramatically, that we've seen that both in capex and kind of notably in the cost of panels, but also the costs of operating an O&M and the cost of capital associated with the plants. And much of that is down to the growing maturity of the sector, the learning that has come from those plants that have been developed, and the industry growing and the kind of the continuing improvement. I think that we need to continue to take that forward, that as we're looking at the targets that need to be achieved for us to decarbonize our power sector and sort of increasingly to enable the decarbonisation of heat and transport across Europe, solar is clearly going to play a central role. That there's kind of different interpretations about how much renewable power and how much solar needs to be brought online, but that we're talking about multiples of where we stand today. That Solar Energy UK is pushing the UK government to treble the capacity to 40 gigawatts from where we are now. That I think that we believe that we can do more than that, but that with the existing regulatory and support frameworks, that's probably an ambitious target to set in Europe. That I know that there's efforts from Solar Power Europe to reach 750 gigawatts across the continent by 2030 as well, which again is leading to multiples of the 150 or so that are in place at the moment. So that I guess it's in a point to take stock now where we are as an industry, where that there is a maturity from a number of sort of specialist smaller firms who'd been developing much of the solar capacity to date, that now that it's very much a large global industry where that we've got the principal utilities and oil and gas firms now participating, bringing their learning from other sectors into things. It's also interesting to take stock following the COP conference, which occurred a couple of weeks ago. I think that I was lucky enough to attend, as were sort of a number of colleagues from the solar sector who I saw there. And I found it inspirational for the collective endeavour of the various actors who are there, really pushing to drive things forward in terms of combating the climate crisis. That seeing everyone from governments pushing the boundaries, the private sector, the finance sector really moving on from where they were, and people on the streets driving that action that needs to happen. And that while it may have been an absolute failure, clearly that the conclusions weren't what's needed to achieve the 1.5 degrees that we're aiming for, that it was a relative success in terms of the amount of progress that was made from where it was expected to be. And I think that it's one of the other things that came to me was the importance of non-state actors, that now that it's no longer just a governmental exercise, that it's up to industry, to the finance sector, to individuals to really be driving this. And that I feel like as an industry that we have a fantastic platform to be driving the change, to be delivering things, and to be showing governments and individuals that we can move and transition faster than perhaps that they're setting their targets. So with that being the case, I think that it's really an opportunity to look at what best practice looks like, how we can be delivering the energy system of the future, and what learnings that we've taken from the past. I think that Stephen and Ralph have given fantastic overviews of the changes that have occurred to the most recent drafts of these best practice guidelines. That I'd be interested to bring in some of the other panelists that we have. Adele, who's the head of global business operations at Lightsource BP. Andrea Viaro, who's the head of solar EMEA for Stäubli electrical contractors, and Alden Lee, who's the head of solar at ABO Wind. That if I was to put to the panel as a starting place, that why do we need these best practice? That I know that I have my impression as to the importance, but I'd be interested to see from those of you who've spent the time and dedicated your work to be delivering these things, that what it is that you feel that is being added by developing these best practice guidelines.
Shall we go ladies first?
Yeah, yes,
ladies
of course, please.
Okay, thank you, Matt, and good morning, everyone, and to the audience, thank you very much for joining in. I think from my perspective, so having worked with the workstream for now 3.5 years, I think the importance of the best practice is that naturally we bring our own experience as contributor, and some of us has been in this industry for the past 10, 12 years. So naturally the lesson that we learn just by carrying out our job in different part of the life cycle and different type of businesses are embedded in the best practice. So if we really want to be able to support the growth at the scale and pace that we are expecting for this industry and renewable in general, then we cannot repeat mistakes. And also the importance of the guidelines is really not looking only at pace, but also looking at what it is that we are putting on the ground, ensuring that our site can really thrive in longevity for the next 30, 35 years. Because just putting a site on the ground for the sake of it and for short-term return is really not what we are after, particularly from an energy transition perspective. So for me, the gaining of that is making sure that we are looking at, as an industry, how we standardize so that we can grow faster and smarter as much as possible. And also in the last publications, we are making a bit of an effort on looking at innovation as well, which wasn't necessarily the case at this level of depth in the past couple of years. So I think we're kind of marrying two things. One is what do we learn on a continuous improvement basis, and what are the potential that innovation and technology can bring us. So that for me is the main motivator as to why I keep year after year coming back to the workstream and to the extent I can help drafting some of these.
Fantastic. No, thanks a lot for that. And I think that's a perfect, I guess, analogy, looking at both the backward looking, that what we've learned to date from the plants that have been built, and that I know that you'll have spent your time managing and operating, and also looking at how best that we can then develop this new capacity that's going to be coming online. The Alden, is there anything that you're wanting to add on your experience of participating in this?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, basically our work stream has started with the O&M guidelines, so it's about maintenance. And when you are engaged with maintenance, sooner or later you find out, well, actually many things could be solved already in the construction phase. When you're engaged in the construction phase, you will realize many things can already be realized within design and procurement phase. And it's not necessarily a cost issue. It's often also are these tiny little things where the industry is still growing and learning, and we can see in the long run from O&M where are mistakes, so what needs to be improved, and coming together as an industry and discussing those issues. It's certainly helpful. It builds a standard, and that's what investors want. And that's also what we want as EPC companies and developers, that we really can provide the right solar power plants. And here we have also structured in a good way, I think, the quality approach in our guidelines, where we really make clear that once you have received the components, you actually only control the components you have. But what kind of components you receive, that's basically another challenge. How to achieve good quality in components. Here we have the quality planning, we have the quality review in terms of audit and monitoring of suppliers, how to do this. So I think that's really valuable information for other EPCs, but also for investors, that they can see what can they ask for in the market and how can they ensure their long-term investment.
Fantastic, thank you. And Andrea, if I'm able to bring you in here, that I'd be interested to get your thoughts on that, how we ensure that consistency of component quality throughout the supply chain.
Thank you, Matt, for the question. And related to what Alden was just mentioning, looking at that from a manufacturer perspective or components, PV component supplier perspective, clearly the intention in this context is to make sure that not only quality components are delivered, but they are used and installed, for instance, maintained properly during the life cycle of the PV project. And that's probably the intention of the best practice, which go beyond the normal certifications or standards that are anyway applied to hardware and components supplied to the value chain for PV constructions, but clearly are not enough to make sure that components are properly installed and used and maintained throughout the complete life cycle of the project in the best possible conditions. And related to that, probably because of the nature of the business that we carry out at Stäubli, we not only connect components physically in the PV fields, but also we connect stakeholders which are involved in the PV project developments and at every step. And the value that we see in that is the fact that quality standards and requirements can really be really kept at high level throughout the value chain. And that's important because, unfortunately, for many reasons, and talking about mistakes, as Adele mentioned, and lessons learned from the past, unfortunately, fast developments or financial pressure or different priorities of the parties involved, or enforced deadlines somehow led to, let's say, tactical decision making or improper procurement or insufficient project supervision or information transfer, and ultimately poor construction or operation and maintenance, which definitely impact the performance and profitability of the assets. And therefore, the conclusion is that this practice best practice document sets, which also goes beyond the EPCs, but also linked to the asset owner, asset management document, and operation and maintenance in particular, really help to achieve this long-term technical and financial success of the PV investments, and therefore linking really the quality of components and practices along the complete project life cycle.
Fantastic. I think that's really helpful to see that whole life cycle approach. Ralph, I was wondering if I could bring you in here. That I know that you've spent a lot of the past decade and before that looking at the panels in particular, and that it'd be interesting to see, I guess, how you see these guidelines being developed, linking in with the kind of the certification that that goes on, and that specifically on the panel side of things, that what we can be looking at in terms of developing best practice in that in the procurement side of things.
Okay, thanks for pointing out that I'm a module person, so I'll stick to that naturally. The certification has been super successful in rooting out certain, what I would call a infant mortality in modules. So it has captured a lot of failure modes, which we do not see very often. However, it only shows me that a module is good enough for a purpose. But it doesn't show me that the specific module which arrives on site is actually the one I've ordered. And PV is an industry which gives a 25-year plus warranty on modules, which is no other industry is doing that. But we do not certify that it is really a 25-year warranty. And unfortunately, failures happen at different phases in the life. And they don't happen because the device isn't good enough, but because we have manufacturing issues. Manufacturing issues is nothing novel to the PV industry. Every industry has that. If you think about how many cars are called back every year, how many, which is a design fault very often or a manufacturing fault, how many recalls have we heard of PV modules actually? And there are some things which should have been recalled. So where I see the guidelines very well, it's just we have now certified in the beginning, it's good enough. This should work. This is what the standard says. But what is really missing is the quality which I've specified also coming on the field. And then also the learning out of the O&M phase. Was it good enough what I specified? Because again, we just like to repeat the mistakes of others sometimes. It seems to be, I can only understand that something is hot if I just burn my own fingers, and I can't listen to anybody else having told me that this is not good enough. And I think the standards here and the guidelines, they bring it to a level that we hopefully can coordinate throughout the life cycle and reduce unnecessary costs of quality. And that would be the main aim for me of the guidelines. And that has to do with workmanship, that has to do with quality control due diligence, this has to do with specifications, and has to be fed back again, because if we know certain modes of installation don't work, then we shouldn't do them in the future. And it's very often on that level.
Fantastic, thank you. And Steve, often you're seeing those modules downstream. That I know that that you've got sort of significant experience looking at the O&M and module cleaning in particular. So I was wondering if you could come in on that. What lessons that that we can be learning from the past? I think that it's interesting, perhaps in this first section, and Adele, that coming on to you afterwards to look at the backward looking, the lessons that we can learn before that we're looking forward.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's nice if we can open with the words of Henry Ford, really. Henry Ford said that a market is never saturated with a good product, but it's very quickly saturated with a bad one. And my experience broadly is across the UK, and this is sadly what we saw. In the early years of solar, there was a gold rush. I think a lot of roofers were engaged in the industry. A lot of electricians tagged solar on to their offering. I think that a lot of people who were doing other forms of renewable energy tagged solar on, and so because there was money to be made in those days, a lot of people just saw the money, and they were out installing all kinds of different standards of systems in all kinds of different ways, all kinds of different standard products. And certainly as we go around as a chiefly a rooftop O&M company focusing on cleaning, we go around and we see more shoddy systems on roofs, sadly, than we do good ones by a long, long way. And so I think really this is because there was a lack of monitoring initially, and it seemed that a lot of people could become engaged in the industry who shouldn't be engaged in the industry. And so I think that those people have gone away. When you look at the dissolved solar companies on organisations like Companies House in the UK, you can see there's a huge amount of solar companies that have gone to the wall or deliberately closed their companies because they knew there would be after sales issues off the back of poorly installed systems. And so I think that best practice guidelines have a twofold purpose from my point of view. I think that moving forward, it allows us as O&M contractors and also installers and EPCs to have a standard that we should be working towards and a standard that we should attain to. So that's one thing that I think is beneficial. I also think, though, that it's beneficial from our clients and prospective and future clients' point of view as well, that they understand that there are standards that they should be looking for in their EPC. There are standards that they should be looking for in their O&M contractor. And we know in the UK that the maths all seem to stack up again, particularly for rooftop solar. We last week at the NEC, we had it explained to us many times how rooftop solar is about to hit a boom time again. So there's the potential for these less than diligent companies to come back into our market. I don't want to see it. The other professionals in the industry don't want to see it. And so I think that having best practice guidelines in place will try and keep these people out as much as possible. That will have the knock-on effect then of having very good quality installs from the very beginning, and that will lead to lower O&M budgets moving forward as well. So for me personally, they're essential, these kinds of things, really, because it professionalizes what we do. Henry Ford, you know, that industry now, the car industry is 150 years old, best part of. They very much have a handle on what they're doing. If you say we're a tenth of that age, 15 years into our industry, we're not infants anymore, but we're not an absolute mature industry either, in my opinion. So we still have lessons to learn, but I think that these O&M guidelines and other guidelines that Solar Power Europe and Solar Energy UK are putting together will help really professionalise our industry, helping us to bring distressed assets up to scratch, and then making sure that moving forward we're installing good quality assets that will be good to maintain in the future. So I think it's really, really important work that we're all engaged in.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot from that. And yeah, it's interesting looking at solar moving beyond its infancy. We're going through the difficult teenage years at the moment before we reach full maturity. Adele, are you able to come in now? That, and I guess it'd be helpful to have your reflections, having been managing a large number of plants across a number of geographies, and being able to draw some of the lessons learned from that.
So I suppose we are a pretty terrible teenager for a starter, right? We have been spoiled quite significantly when we were toddlers, so that's kind of an issue that is, you know, I think I was to start, I would second what Steve was saying. So I suppose at the beginning of the golden rush of solars, maybe because the subsidy were extremely generous, maybe because the system itself and the power plant itself doesn't necessarily face the complexity of, I don't know, a CCGT power plant or a nuclear power plant, and everyone just thinks that, you know, you stick the panels to the ground, the sun is shining, and by magic everything is going to happen and the work is done, right? So we kind of surfed that wave for a few years, but I also think that together with more opportunistic players at the time, perhaps there were players that were genuinely very interested and very invested in the market, but just not at the right level of maturity. And the main learning that I have seen throughout the years is at the very beginning of the installations in the UK, for example, you could really tell that the design was very bespoke. every single site has a very peculiar design. Maybe we had just more resources financially available to invest into that because the subsidy was particularly generous and we were still learning. So every different design was a learning opportunity. But really what is interesting in this teenage phase of maturity is that we are starting standardizing. And that is the key for further growth, I find. We are standardizing the components we are buying. We're not going to buy anything that is available on the market at that point in time, because at the 31st of March, we need to have a site connected. So if I need to change inverter in flight 3 weeks before the deadline, I just will go buy whatever is available and somehow patch the site so that I can have it connected. This type of behavior is not happening anymore. So we are selective in the way we go through our supply chain, not only from a contractor and installation perspective, but also from a key component perspective. More and more players are entering into long-term framework agreements. So it's about partnership. The first learning is that you really need to partner with your supply chain. Otherwise, it's not scalable. You are not going to be able to have a sustainable supply chain if you don't really cherry pick the relationships you want to have. And the same thing goes for installation, because it's the simple thing in installations that, if done quickly and in a rush, are actually going to fundamentally underpin your ability to meet or not meet your long-term production targets. And really, even from a design and a technical specifications perspective, standardization is becoming really key. It will allow us to deploy fast, and it would allow us to deploy reliable sites. Because at the end of the day, building them on the face of it, and now Alden is going to probably kill me the next time you see me, but is not that difficult. The real difficulty is making sure that that site is going to be reliable, operationally safe, and sustainable for the next 35 years. I mean, it's monumental. It's not, and it's a low touch exercise, the one that we have done in the last 10 years. And so this is a great opportunity for us to really look at how can we industrialize and how can we raise the bar. And for me, standard, consistency, and long-term partnership with your supply chain have become really a mantra, I will say.
Amazing. No, that's really helpful, and I think that I'd be keen to bring in others to hear whether they're seeing standardization either being something that's being aspired to or being achieved. Does anyone else want to come in now?
Yeah, maybe I can continue here. I mean, because what we actually can see in the industry, we had a standardization in modules, and suddenly we have different kind of sizes of modules. So I think 2 years ago, we have built power plants with modules which have cells of a size of 158 millimeters. Then it went to 166 quickly to a cell size of 182 now, and even 210. So it's really separating that we have now some companies with this size, other companies with that size, other companies are still not deciding to which size they go. And with those new cell sizes, you have really a different kind of module sizes. So quite large, and then when you cut it and have fewer cells, of course you can make it smaller. So that's what we can see, that here the industry is really looking where is the best price point. So we have on the one hand indeed the trend to standardization, but on the other hand, every company in China is looking where can I save another 0.0 cents with the modules, and looking to find an edge here. So this is certainly difficult because yes, as Adele also pointed out, it's important to have this long-term partnership. You don't decide for the inverter 3 weeks ahead. In fact, you would do it 1 year ahead, or even before in some markets, 2 years ahead, that you would make these decisions. And then you have to make basically predictive selections, because maybe this module or the inverter you're planning with for in 1 year, 4 and 2 years is not yet in the market. And so you assume that they will be in the market. And there are certainly challenges, but important is, and I think this also is what Adele said, is that you have long-term partners. So if you plan this with long-term partners, if you know the partner already for some time, if you know how the partner works, if the partner knows how you work, then this planning is certainly much easier, and problems can be solved easily. Here I also wanted to point out what Adele basically said. It's this 25 years which a power plant should last, or at least where you have the module performance guarantee, usually with glass modules even up to 30 years. And this is what we forget sometimes. I mean, you of course maintain the solar power plant, but there is no specific maintenance for each module, which means you really have a product which is outside rain, storm, snow for more than 20 years without basically maintenance, and we expect it to function well. So where is another product where you have this, where you expect it really to perform outside for a period of 20, 30 years? So this really shows how important, again, it is to have the right quality, not to make quick selections, but really to have your partner who you know will build quality for you, which you monitor, and where you really ensure the long-term investment.
Fantastic. No, and I think that an interesting thing for me coming out of that is now that from the lessons of the past, that are we now in a position where we're able to design plants with asset management and O&M in mind, that can all of these lessons be taken into account such that plants are being designed for their 30 to 40 year asset life? Because that I think that in many cases that wasn't the case for the projects that were built in the subsidy rushes, that either because that there was other kind of economic pressures, or because that many of the actors involved hadn't been involved in managing plants in the field, so weren't aware of the issues that arise. That do you feel like that we've now got enough of a track record of the issues that come up in the field to be able to design plants to last? Steve?
Yes, so if I can sort of take the illustration out of the field and let's visit the roofs again. We see so many roofs where there's simply not safe access around each part of the array. You might be able to access 70, 80% of it, but then there's 20% in the darkest recesses that you just simply can't access because no one's given a thought to a safe access method. It can be incredibly costly for clients to maintain rooftop solar assets because no one gave thought to even how you're going to get onto the roof. So it can be very expensive, hiring lorry-mounted cherry pickers and the like. There have been instances where people have taken man-safe systems off the roof in order to fit more solar panels on the roof. That's just crazy sort of design behavior. And so we've tried hard as we've gone through the rooftop O&M guidelines to encourage system designers to think about these things like safe access. It's all right having a roof full of solar panels, but as Alden has just said, you've got to maintain these things, and it's a very long life cycle that they've got. So it can be incredibly expensive to maintain a rooftop asset of scale, or even a small one, if safe access has not been taken into account. So I personally encourage anyone listening that's engaged in rooftop solar on the design element, you have to start thinking about, if you're not already, including in your designs costs for ladder access up the outside of the building, costs for man-safe systems to be installed. In the UK, we have to inspect those man-safe systems annually. That should be included in an O&M budget. All these additional costs were not anticipated in the early days. The focus was just literally let's get as much solar on the roof as we can. That's going to serve our client well. It just doesn't serve your clients well to do it that way, because you have to maintain them, and it's incredibly costly when you're looking at roof mounted. And then as we project forward into floating solar as well, that's even more expensive than it is to maintain rooftop solar. There's all kinds of issues associated with floating solar that certain companies just didn't anticipate doing. They fill reservoirs with thousands and thousands of solar panels, and then when it goes wrong, everyone's looking at each other thinking, how on earth do we put this right? And so you've got to start thinking about all of these things at design phase. It's incredibly important to do that. So I think we've got enough of a track record now to rectify the mistakes of the past on designs moving forward.
Thanks, Steve. And I think that it's an important point that's been picked up, I think, across a number of the best practice guidelines that are being released now, that health and safety is much more integrated across the piece, which is clearly kind of central to all of the engineering and operations aspects, but perhaps that wasn't such a significant theme in some of the earlier drafts. Has anyone else got anything to add around taking the designing plants for operations?
Just wanted
Andrea,
to add a
please.
comment from my side, linked to the input from Alden about standardization, for instance, for components, which is clearly, of course, a positive trend, I think, on as long as it helps to improve quality overall, and clearly reliability or profitability and long-term performance of the plants. What I think, from my point of view, is probably still lacking, probably, or actually the purpose of the best practice guidelines actually is aimed exactly to that, is probably to talk about standardization of processes and best practices on processes, on installation or maintenance, etc. And that's exactly, in my view, the purpose of documents like the best practice guidelines, to fill this gap at that level where there is a lot of probably quality standards for components, but probably not enough guidelines or best practice descriptions that really help to avoid the I think Adele mentioned something like the teenager enthusiasm approach, when of course we think we know how to do things properly, but in reality probably we are just repeating mistakes over and over again, and probably it's time probably to learn the lesson finally, and to implement a proper standardization at every level of the value chain, including also, of course, all the aspects, because quality starts from engineering, production, shipments, and construction, but down to I would say not even up to operation and maintenance only, but down to end of life of components. So the complete life cycle of the PV industry should be really benefiting from the contribution of this documentation from Solar Power Europe.
Fantastic. No, I think that's.
I would have a quick comment on that as well, which I would say we are standardizing, which is good. But one thing we are really missing is also have quality marks on H&S for components sometimes. For example, we have a significant number of backsheet issues, which actually drives my installation levels down, which is a health and safety risk. We have in Germany a fair bit of plants where you need to be a certified electrician by law to go on, because my installation to the ground is so bad that there is a risk to limb and life. So, however, this is not a warranty case. This is, from my point of view, this is not even a product case. This is, we are outside the 5 years limited warranty, so we're stuck. So how to deal with this and how to predict with this, maybe a teenage issue, but also it's something quite essential. Also, there is a performance issue here, but it's not at our measurement condition. So we are missing some quality markers yet, which need to be there to ensure a longevity of the devices or of the system as a whole.
Great, thank you. One of the things that I wanted to pick up on, kind of moving to looking forward, is something that Steve mentioned earlier about training and the workforce that's required. Clearly that there's incredibly ambitious deployment targets across the EU now, in in the past it was the case where that we tended to have solar booms in one market after the other, so that many of the workforce moved around from Spain to Italy, Germany to UK to Eastern Europe and back again. So I think that we're now looking to be in a place where that we've got gigawatt markets existing and consistent deployment happening across Europe. That it's a case that we need many more people working in the solar sector than was the case to deliver this. So that we're going to be bringing new people into the sector. That it's something that's sort of come up as a theme within some of the work that we do with Solar Energy UK, is the consistent messaging, which has kind of moved beyond anecdote about pretty much every firm existing in the sector having challenges finding the right sort of people to recruit to be able to deliver on their business plan. So that I'd be keen to get the panel's thoughts around how we do this as an industry, both sort of bringing in new talent and what the training requirements are, and that whether there needs to be standardization of that training and qualifications. Steve, as you kick this off, that I'll put it back to you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Matt. Yeah, so it is a big sort of subject. I speak to people in all sorts of industries because of multiple businesses that I own, and one of the things that I talk to people in the education sector a lot is that the young people in the colleges and the universities are looking around their own campuses, going to the teachers and saying, why do we not have solar on our roofs? Where is our wind turbine? And all the other forms of renewable energy sources they want to see. So I think there's a real appetite amongst young people who are sort of in their mid to late teens for renewable energy at the moment. There isn't a college course that you can leave and go directly into doing something in solar in the UK. That's a huge process, I think. I think that's probably too big a leap for us as an industry to try and tackle straight away, to go, right, this is a course that we want to see. But I think that it can begin with satellite courses that we can get approved by the likes of City and Guilds and people like this, where we can approach organisations and say, we as an industry have this need. Here are the skill sets that we feel that we need to have fulfilled, and therefore how can we as an industry inform and educate you to give you the module blocks that you need in order to build a qualification. I think there is definitely a conversation that we can have there. I know that there are individuals in the UK solar industry that are sort of setting up their own training modules for their sort of field. So I know that there's one existing about a certain level of training that you need in order to go onto a solar farm, for instance. Presently, anyone can just waltz onto a solar farm and just wander around. Well, you're going onto a power plant, and that really shouldn't be the case. You should have a certain knowledge of the equipment that you're working on. And cleaning, again, coming back to cleaning, is an excellent example of that. There's such a scattergun approach at the moment to cleaning. It's unreal. I think on the ground mount side of things, it's a lot more standardized. But on the roofs, any Tom, Dick or Harry can grab any piece of equipment that they think is suitable. They can use any sort of chemical that they think is suitable. They go up using any old method of access that they think is suitable, and they clean panels in any way that they think is suitable. And going back to Adele's point about standardization, I think that there should be some form of standardization, both in terms of methodology, but also qualification. You should have some form of solar qualification to do with cleaning, in my opinion, if you were to go around cleaning panels. So I think that there are conversations that can be had with the likes of City and Guilds and other training bodies. ROSPA, another one that we use for training our staff for health and safety qualifications, but there's absolutely nothing to do with solar whatsoever. There's a very basic sort of electrical awareness course that people can do, but that doesn't really cover anything that we do to do with cleaning or systems and checks. So I think that there are some conversations that need to start being opened. And then eventually, when we've got these satellite courses in place, I think then we can look backwards and go back to the education boards within governments and say to them, okay, this is what we've got now regarding training. where can we get a formal qualification to help drive some of the young people with their zeal, with their enthusiasm into our solar industry. It's a big problem for companies such as mine to recruit staff, because they think they have an idea of what working for a solar maintenance company will be like. They come into it and they think, well, it's not quite what they thought, and then they leave. It's not quite what they thought because they don't know presently what it is that they're coming into. So I think that there does need to be some form of educational process. It's a long path, though, I think, but it can be accelerated by starting small and getting some of the satellite sort of training modules put in place for some of the more specialist sides of our industry.
Great, thanks, Steve. Andrea, please.
Yeah, very good point, Stephen. Thank you very much for your input. And I totally agree with you. And definitely at academic level or school level, clearly there would be really the benefit of having some trainings and proper educations about that. What as an industry I see happening more and more often from the manufacturer side as well, and that's completely feasible already and already implemented in some cases, is like probably at a later stage education for workers, for instance, on specific modules or topics to increase awareness and knowledge about how to implement properly installation or maintenance or specific aspects. In our case, about connections of the DC wiring, for instance, or PV modules or inverters are doing something similar as well on specific features of the components that they supply. This somehow, of course, help from my point of view to really increase the professionalism of the operators in the field, but clearly there is a long way to go, and doesn't mean that cannot be achieved, but clearly I think with the contribution of also the manufacturing environment, this is really feasible to really somehow probably improve the overall competence of the workers, because somehow I understand what Steve was saying in the fact that that's also the beauty of solar. It seems simple, and it seems such a simple idea to do that everyone wants to jump into that, but in reality probably a lot of people does not really realize how the complexity actually is in the details, and when something goes wrong even on small things can have a catastrophic impact otherwise on the overall PV system performance and reliability. So definitely I think as an industry we can already have an impact and to improve the situation even from the manufacturer side to really increase awareness and share knowledge and train and educate people to increase the professionalism and knowledge about the PV.
Fantastic, thanks, Andrea.
Can I step into this, because thanks for asking the question, Matt, in the first place, because the topic of skills and talent and young talent in particular is quite close to my heart. So if there is in the audience anyone who's member of the life cycle quality workstream, spoiler alert, one of the things that we were discussing with Alden for next year was working a bit more on skills and talent and perhaps run some publications around that. So we'll see whether we can get there. So this really emphasizes how even the industry feels that this is quite collectively important topic to cover. For me, there are three aspects. I would second what Steve was saying in terms of extending their relationship with vocational or academic bodies and make sure that people are prepared and know what type of skills that are required by the industry. To be fair, we have such a wide variety from the skills, the vocational skills of who works on site, whether it is electrical maintenance or ground maintenance or cleaning of the panels, all the way to office-based staff that has quite a wide variety of skills, right? Some of them can be quality and safety specialists, other are project developers, other are asset managers, engineers, financial accountants. So the variety of different skills is quite daunting, to be fair. And the first element to think is how much this is changing. So today I'm hiring data engineers, data scientists, data governance specialists. 5 years ago, I would have never thought that I would spend my day interviewing data geek. I mean, I'm the type of person, for the English people on the phone, that whenever click appears on BBC News, I just change channel, right? It's not my thing. But I am in the position where this type of data people with that type of skill set is not just simply coding, is actually architecture, and business enterprise architecture are becoming more and more vital. So there is an entire element of what are the skills that we're going to need for the future? What are the emerging skills that 5 years ago we didn't think we necessarily needed as a solar developer or IPP? So that's one chapter. And the second chapter is how much can we actually requalify people? How can we help people that are off certain jobs or certain sectors, and we can help them requalify and help us either in construction or during the operational life of our sites. So one initiative that we are very, very proud we have carried out in Lightsource BP was with one of our, again, to partnership with one of our EPC contractors in the US. We started a program to employ American veterans back from Iraq and Afghanistan who didn't have any opportunity of finding a place in the job market. And we went through a process of education requalification. They now have qualifications and can go and work for other construction companies. So I think if we look at the prospect of sustainability and how we put people at the center of our operations, we can, pin to the younger talent and help identifying what skills there are with whatever type of academic or vocational institution we can partner with. But also, let's not forget that we represent a great opportunity for people to find a second chance and a second opportunity in their career. And that, I think, is a very powerful message for us as an industry.
No, definitely. Ralph, just before we finish up on this, I wanted to bring you in because that this was an area that I believe you had some experience in from the academic side in your previous role. That what role do you see as the for universities or the academic side of things in providing this training, and how can industry better engage?
Okay, I still am an academic. I still have a spare time or a hobby where I'm a professor at a University of Applied Sciences. So I think it is critical. The issue for the universities is that they are also bound by certain constraints. That in the UK, they're businesses, from where you know that. Here in Germany, we're just bound by students we have incoming, the same in Switzerland, France, a similar model. I think it would be critical to come together from the industry side and university, but also vocational trainers, because I think this is the same issue for them to develop maybe an industry certified course and then find a business model which works for the educators as well as for the companies and make that happen. It is critical, I think. I live in an area where it is absolutely critical to retrain people because we are changing from coal mining to, well, green economy or whatever the dream of the day is. They're just peddling here. But the fact is that we're closing down all the lignite mines, and we need to find jobs for those people who work there. And what better than working in solar energy or in wind farms or maintenance, whatever, which is maybe even higher skilled jobs, better paid jobs. But we need to train them from driving a digger to driving a lawnmower. So sort of to put it very strictly and not cut through any cables or something along those lines. So, but this retraining, this is really an effort which should be done by educators with guidance of industry, because the other thing I have seen very often is that motivated universities go out, they do develop a course, which then tells you how to put 20 different layers of semiconductors together, but doesn't help anybody in the industry by just maintaining a PV system. So there needs to be some guidance also from industry, what is really required. And the recognition that what industry finds urgent is mostly boring for universities. So in between, there needs to be some communication.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, I feel like that there's a lot of, I think, interest in this across the industry, that it seems to me to be one of the key work streams that many of us will be working on over the next couple of years to try and bridge this gap. Moving the conversation forward, that I wanted to pick up on Adele's point around how the people we're employing are shifting, and I guess the theme towards data and digitalization being something that many of us are more and more engaged in, that looking at how best to be sort of designing plants to be operated and maintained efficiently over their lives, that we see a lot of innovation. I think that's again one of the themes that was picked up in the essence of the best practice guides that are being developed. It'd be useful to get a sense from any of you who have been involved in developing these best practice guidelines around that, how data-driven quality management and innovations are feeding into the way that plants are being designed and managed now, and how this is shifting the industry forward. Or maybe it's not.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. Typical
Okay.
Zoom problems. Okay, I'll start because the Jen seems to be a bit shy on the topic. So let's step back on what we think digitalization is. So I've been working on a digitalization strategy for the last 17 months, a very long 17 months. And what I realized is that whenever we talk about digitalization, the first thing that springs to mind are data. And then we can call about big data, data quality, blah, 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 or systems, softwares, or whatever, like interfaces, smart apps, very colorful and looking super smart. But actually, what digitalization is about is people, right? Is to the extent that is not used as a way to empower your staff, then I think we're missing the point. So what is really underpinning the effort of looking at data and being smarter about data and drive improvement is really looking at a way to empower your talent to do more with what they have available in the same amount of time, ideally less time, but just understand more and put their brain to work for something that is more interesting than copy pasting stuff in Excel most of the times. And the other element that I have realized is that we talk a great deal about artificial intelligence and super smart advanced analytics. And actually, what sometimes we do, or I have seen happening in the industry over and over again, is relying on a supplier to come and provide the software or interface, advanced analytics, system of insight, whatever it is, and also with that package, look after the structure and the architecture of our data. So my lesson learned in the last 17 months about this is do not do that. Build up your own data strategy, build up your own data architecture, build up your own data governance. Do not rely on somebody else's do that for you. It's too important. It's too critical to make sure that you have long-term control and long-term enabler for your people then to get the most out of the data and use whatever tools is best for you at the point in time of the development of your organization. But really, it's not what we are using as an interface, is what is behind it that is extremely important. And I think sometimes, unless we talk with people that are really expert data architects, we kind of lose it. We kind of lose sight of where the key investment should be, and the key investment is in the infrastructure in the background, in the technology you use to create your data lake, to create your data warehouse. If that is developed correctly and set up correctly, then the power you can extrapolate from the data is extremely high. And you can plug in whatever tools, whatever app, whatever system of insight you wish. So I think it would be very refreshing if, as an industry, we were all to embrace this type of approach and look at how we get it right from the first place. And to be fair, how we get it right from the first place is the specification of the COM system and the SCADA system and the hardware you put in the site and you install in the site at the end of construction. So it all goes back full circle to how it is that you design and you build your site, even from a data acquisition perspective. And yet the efficiency that these tools can bring is absolutely impressive. From a performance monitoring perspective, we are seeing, we kind of doubling up the number of megawatt that a performance analyst can look at with the support of this type of tools. And this is really really powerful, both from a business case perspective, but also from an empowerment and motivation of staff perspective. So I think it's not that much the shiny interface and user interface we're using, which is clearly very, very important too, but really is the effort of going slower, taking a step back, putting together your data architecture properly, and then accelerate whenever that is done. That would be my 2 cents.
Fantastic. No, I think it's really interesting to hear your experience going through this. That anyone else got anything to offer here as to how they're seeing?
Hi, Matt, and just elaborating a little more on this digitalization of data, importance of data. Clearly, which I understand it's paramount for monitoring and performance and KPIs of PV plants, but in our context, talking about components, we see how many times, unfortunately, even basic informations are lost in the value chain, and that's a frustrating situation in the industry, I would say, because the impact on the practicalities are very high, unfortunately, on probably lost performance or downs of systems, etc. And definitely, I think digitalization can surely help, but as if we say that digitalization is about people, I would say that it's of course also about information and quality of information, and first of all about what kind of information are important or necessary to transfer from one party to another along the value chain during the lifetime of a PV plant, because we know that typically PV plants are not owned and operated by one single company along the 25 or 30 years of expected lifetime. And that's important, especially from my point of view, to exchange information between people thanks to the help of digitalization, if beneficial, to make sure that the quality is kept intact throughout the complete chain.
Fantastic, thank you. Alden, Steve, is there something that you see impacting your work, or that is this one of these themes that is kind of overplayed as compared to some of the more basic elements that need to be covered off?
Well, I think most important things were said. What I can add, I mean, I'm in charge of solar within ABO Wind, but as you can see from the name, ABO Wind is a company which is engaged more than 20 years in building wind projects. And the problem we have actually is to streamline basically the data from wind and solar. So that's another way where we really need standardization. You know, it's one thing to have a wind project, then you have a solar project, but of course we would like to have to combine it, and you might add other renewable energies like hydro. I mean, that's basically the way where we want to standardize, that we really have to see that we can monitor all of it, and there is still a way to go, I would say. And this is especially required once you go for hybrid solutions, that let's say you have really power plants where wind and solar and whatsoever is combined, that you don't have different data streams for this.
Okay, I think that's an interesting point that I'd like to put more widely, that we've spoken a lot about what can be learnt from the past, from the existing plants that everyone is working on, but less so about what we can learn from other industries. That there's been kind of the analogy with the automotive sector that was drawn earlier, but I know that a number of you work within organizations or have interests beyond solar, and Lightsource BP is obviously kind of benefiting from a partnership with BP, which has significant other interests. Where do you think that the solar industry can learn from other industries, and that how is that feeding into the best practice that the industry is developing? Steve, please.
Okay, so
sorry, I think Steve was just going to come in.
Yeah, sorry. I believe in the people, Matt. I've always believed in the people. Since I've become engaged in this solar industry, the people have continued to amaze me. And I think that we are the innovators, and I think that we have all of the answers in ourselves. It's just discovering how we're going to get them out. And so coming back to this training element, I think that if we can invest in the young people, I think that we will find our way to fast track this industry and upskill ourselves very, very capably. So I think for me, it's a case of education. I think that if we continue to look around and inspire each other, and we are the innovators at the end of the day, you know, we're a very small sector, but I think about where I was in 2013 compared to where I am now in this industry in 2021, and I compare my peers around me, and I think that the distance that we've come as an industry is quite phenomenal, really. So I think if we just continue to invest in the people, I think that's the brightest future that we'll have as an industry, really, and to continue to remain bonded to each other and determined to share information with each other. And these best practice guidelines, you do forsake some of your commercial IP. I think there are instances when you sit in the room with your so-called competitors, maybe, and you do give away some of your IP, you do give away some of your business model. But I think that you have to sometimes sacrifice the I for the sake of the we. And I think that needs to continue to be the case. And that's what I like about these best practice guidelines. And that's what I like about the working groups, is that we're all willing to forsake some of ourselves for the brighter future that we as an industry will have. And that in turn leads on to a better sort of place for our children and future generations to be.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastically optimistic outlook. And I think that's something that I believe in, obviously, is the kind of the benefit that comes from collaboration across industry. Obviously, that there's areas where it makes sense to withhold information from a commercial sensitivity perspective, but then there's a huge amount of scope for collaboration and growth through the individuals and organizations working together to move things forward. Adele, did you want to come in now?
I suppose a couple of things that have become apparent in working in a joint venture with a pretty major energy company is very much the level of precision and standardization they achieved on the operational side of things, which as solar industry we are in the process of developing, and particularly on health and safety. I think the learning that has been going through a number of different industry, and oil and gas is one of those, is really remarkable. And it's fantastic to be able to shortcut some of the learning curve by adopting certain change management procedure, lesson learned, discipline that they have already deployed during the course of the year. So it's not the solution to all of the problems, but it allows us the benefit of not having to reinvent the wheel and move a bit faster, particularly on topics like health and safety, which are absolutely critical. And I was laughing when Steve was talking about floating solar, because I have my own share of pain about that. And to be fair, not that BP would have known how to do it better, but the procedures they would have put in place to help us handling our rooftops or our more complicated site would have allowed us to move a bit quicker. And I think this is the type of learning that humbly I think we can learn from other industry and from manufacturing too, to be fair. Continuous improvement in the way we approach processes and procedures or ways of working, which is very standard in manufacturing, is great value to an industry like ours. So wise, I think we are in a very peculiar pot of talent and skills, and not everything is replicable. I think if we are humble enough to look at what other industries have been doing and take advantage of that learning, we would really be able to accelerate. And we need to, right? Because the pace of the growth that is expected from our industry is such that we cannot just start from scratch every time. We need to be opportunistic and take advantage of what is out there available to us to learn from.
Thank you. Alden, Andrea, Ralph, is there anything that you wanted to input around kind of learning from other industries?
Yeah, I think I agree on the fact that from the manufacturing environment, especially, there is still a little too much fragmentation on components used for PV systems, and clearly there is opportunity, I think, to reach a higher level of integration along the value chain, because in some cases it's too obvious how specific components are not really designed or engineered to be fitting together, unfortunately, and there is a strong dominating force upstream, clearly imposing some standards, let's say, or specification of components which are not necessarily the best fit for the rest of the ecosystem. And I think in other industries, from automotive or other much more mature industry, for sure there is a higher level of integration, meaning co-design of components, for instance, to make sure that the final product, which is the PV plant, is working together well. All the components are working well together to achieve the best COE or cost of kilowatt hours, because that's in reality the ultimate goal. Not to compete or not to make more challenging the competition just to differentiate or to somehow compete on specifications or innovations necessarily force too much against somehow the ultimate goal that we should all achieve together, I think.
I would like to turn the question around, because I think there's a lot other industries can learn also from solar, and that fits actually also the best practice guidelines that we basically show them what to do, because what we can say for solar is fast. It's the fastest energy. Now we have those energy giants entering the solar industry. They got used to planning cycles of 10 years. Also for wind, wind takes maybe up to 6 years, but in France it might also take up to 10 years. You know, in solar, you say today, okay, I want a solar power plant there, next year it's there. And therefore, actually, all those companies who get used to coal power plants and nuclear power plants and whatsoever, and even wind, when they enter the solar industry, wow, it's so fast, it's speedy, there are changes, we look for continuous improvement. It's about efficiency, it's about, you know, cost down, being competitive. So in this regard, I think the solar industry has a lot also to teach other industries. It's very competitive in solar, and I think that's why, especially for those companies, the best guidelines are very, very important to see. Okay, what's important? Where shall we focus? But maybe also what can we leave out, which might be important for a 10-year project, and which is not valid for a 2-year project.
Fantastic. No, I think that's a really nice place to wrap up, to look at, I guess, the successes of our industry, and that what has been achieved over the past 15 years, and that the nature of that accelerated continuous improvement and the speed with which that we're traveling means that there are learnings that we can take to others. I think that we're reaching the end of the session now, so that I'd like to thank all of the panelists for joining today. Thanks also to Solar Energy UK and Solar Power Europe for organising this, and again to Bird & Bird and the other sponsors for their involvement. That we've got a number of other sessions coming up over the course of today and tomorrow. I found this morning's session incredibly interesting, that clearly that there's a strong role for best practice being developed, but that having the opportunity to dive into how that standardization becomes increasingly important and is played out. Really the focus on people being the center of this, and the need to focus on training and our future workforce, that building partnerships and the kind of the full supply chain into best practice, and having the learnings to be designing plants for the longevity that they're looking to be sort of operated for, building in learnings from O&M and asset management, talking through sort of data and digitalization strategies and what that can look like across our sector, and kind of finally wrapping up with learnings from other industries. I think that there's a lot of depth that's been gone into, and a number of these subjects will be picked up in the other sessions over the next couple of days. So once again, thanks to all of the panelists today for their involvement today, and also for all of the hard work that they've put into developing these best practice guides. And thanks to all of you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.